I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for the past 5 years I've been in a wheelchair due to an accident. Despite that, I've never missed a Thanksgiving at my parents' house. It's always been a big deal. Tons of extended family, food, and the kind of chaos that only happens when you cram too many relatives into one place. So, I didn't think much of it when November rolled around, assuming plans were the same as always. But this year, something felt off. Usually, by the first week of November, my mom is already calling me about what time I'll be over, what dish I want to bring, and whether I need help getting into the house. My sister, cousins, someone, always mentions something about who's coming, what drama is brewing, or some other family nonsense. This time, radio silence. No calls, no texts, nothing. At first I figured they were just busy, but as the days went on I started feeling weird about it. So I texted my mom, "Hey, what's the plan for Thanksgiving?" She took hours to respond, and when she finally did, all she said was, "Oh, it's gonna be a little different this year." That was it, no details, no follow-up, just that. I stared at the message, confused. Different how? I asked her when I should come over. She took even longer to respond this time. "We're still finalizing everything. I'll let you know soon." Something was definitely up. My gut told me she was dodging. My family isn't the type to finalize anything. Thanksgiving has been at my parents' house for years. The plans are always the same. A few days passed, and still nothing. No updates. No texts. At this point, I was getting a bad feeling, so I called my sister. She picked up, and we chatted for a bit. Small talk, nothing serious. Then I casually asked, "So what's up with Thanksgiving?" There was a pause. A long one. Too long. Then she let out this awkward laugh and said, "Oh yeah, that's been complicated this year." I asked what she meant, and she immediately started backtracking, saying something about how Mom and Aunt Lisa were just trying to figure things out this time around. That made no sense. I pressed her on it. She hesitated again, then sighed. They were just trying to work around the aesthetic this year. The what? I thought I misheard her. I asked her to repeat it. She went quiet for a second, and then mumbled, "Mom and Aunt Lisa were worried about your wheelchair. They thought it would stand out too much in the dining room." This year I felt my stomach drop. I asked her what she meant by that. More silence. Then finally she admitted it. They thought it would stand out too much. "You know, with the way the dining room is set up this year." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked her, point blank, if they had decided not to invite me because of my wheelchair. Another long pause. Then she quietly said, "I don't know. I think they just didn't know how to make it work." I hung up and immediately called my mom. She answered on the second ring, her voice unusually bright. Too bright. I didn't waste time. I asked her straight up if I was invited to Thanksgiving or not. She hesitated. "Sweetheart, we had to rethink things this year because of how the dining setup changed. We didn't know if we could make space for you." I asked her what things she meant. She started rambling about space, the flow of the house, how they had already set up the dining room a certain way, and how they didn't want to disrupt the layout. She kept throwing out excuses, but the more she talked, the more obvious it became. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about the dining room. It was about them not wanting my wheelchair in their perfect Thanksgiving setup. I reminded her that I've been in a wheelchair for 5 years and have been coming to Thanksgiving every single year since. She tried to act like it was different this time, something about how they had a new table arrangement and how they just couldn't make it work this year. I asked her if she'd even tried to make it work, if they had even considered adjusting things, moving furniture, or God forbid, just letting me sit somewhere else. Silence. That's when I knew they didn't even try. I was still trying to wrap my head around it when I got a call from my cousin, one of the few family members I'm actually close with. She sounded upset, and before I even said anything, she blurted out, "I just want you to know I think this whole thing is messed up." I asked her what she meant. She sighed and said, "Some of them also felt uncomfortable. They said it would be too hard seeing you like that and didn't want the holiday to feel heavy." That was the real reason. It wasn't about space. It wasn't about flow. Some of them just didn't want to look at me. I felt sick. I opened the family group chat, took a deep breath, and typed out one message. "So just to be clear, I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving because my wheelchair doesn't match the aesthetic." Within seconds, my mom called me. I didn't pick up. Then my sister. Then my aunt. Then my mom again. I ignored all of them. A few minutes later, my mom finally responded in the chat, "Sweetheart, you're overreacting. This is not what you think it is. Please don't make this into a big deal." I read the message. Then I turned off my phone. Happy Thanksgiving, I guess. After I turned off my phone, I thought that was the end of it. At least for the night. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of missed calls and texts. My mom, my sister, Aunt Lisa, even some cousins, all trying to spin the situation, trying to make it seem like this wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. They made it a big deal the moment they decided that their aesthetic was more important than inviting me to Thanksgiving. So I did what anyone would do when their family pulls some messed up nonsense like this. I posted about it. I kept it simple. No over-the-top ranting, no exaggeration, just facts. Found out my family didn't invite me to Thanksgiving this year because my wheelchair didn't match the aesthetic. Been in a wheelchair for 5 years, and I guess this is where we're at now. I attached a screenshot of my mom's message from the group chat. the one where she told me not to make this into a big deal. Then I put my phone down and went about my day. It didn't take long. By the time I checked back, the post had exploded. A handful of friends and some relatives spoke up, shocked by what happened. Others stayed quiet, probably not sure if they should get involved. People were sharing it, tagging others, calling out how disgusting it was. Family friends started messaging me privately, telling me they had no idea this was happening. Some even reached out to my mom, demanding an explanation, and then, right on schedule, my phone started ringing again. Mom, I didn't pick up. She tried again, and again, and again. Then finally, she texted, "You need to take that post down. You're making this look worse than it is." Making it look worse. Like she hadn't just admitted to not inviting me because of my wheelchair. I ignored her, but a few minutes later, my dad called. He's never been the type to get involved in family drama, but he left a voicemail saying we needed to talk, so I called him back. Unlike my mom, he didn't try to downplay what happened. He admitted he wasn't directly involved in the decision, but he had overheard some conversations and suspected what was going on. He apologized. But then he said, "You know your mom, she just gets caught up in these things. She didn't mean to hurt you." I asked him if he really believed that, if he really thought it was just a mistake. He sighed and said he didn't want to pick sides, which meant he already had. The fallout kept spreading. A few aunts and uncles reached out, horrified. They had no idea what was going on, and made it clear they didn't support my mom's decision. Meanwhile, my sister was trying to do damage control in the group chat, claiming this wasn't about discrimination, that it was just a misunderstanding. I called her out immediately. A misunderstanding is forgetting to send an invitation, not deliberately leaving someone out because their wheelchair doesn't match the aesthetic. Mom finally tried to apologize, or at least what she thought was an apology. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but you have to understand. We were just trying to make everything look perfect for the holiday, and we didn't know how to adjust the arrangement. Not I'm sorry we hurt you. Not we were wrong. Just another excuse. Another attempt to justify what she did." Then my cousin called, the one who had told me the real reason behind all this. She sounded guilty. Apparently, Aunt Lisa was furious that I made this public because now Thanksgiving is ruined. No, Thanksgiving wasn't ruined. It was exposed. At that point, I decided I wasn't going to sit around feeling sorry for myself. If they didn't want me at their Thanksgiving, fine. I'd host my own. I texted the relatives who had reached out to me, the ones who actually seemed to care, and told them they were welcome at my place. I'd cook, we'd order food, whatever. I wasn't going to spend the holiday alone just because my family decided I wasn't convenient for their decor. A few cousins decided to skip my mom's dinner, saying they didn't feel comfortable. An uncle called to say he had second thoughts, but others were still unsure. They told her they didn't want to be part of something so cruel. That's when she really lost it. She called me furious, demanding to know why I was trying to split the family apart. I told her, "I didn't split anything. You excluded me." That shut her up real quick. Then the final blow, my grandparents found out. I don't know who told them, but it wasn't me. All I know is I got a call from my grandmother, and she was livid. She asked me if it was true, if my mom had really told me not to come because of my wheelchair. I didn't even have to answer. She already knew. The next thing I knew, my mom was blowing up the group chat again, this time in full panic mode. Suddenly, she was backpedaling, claiming it was all just a misunderstanding, that she thought I wouldn't want to come anyway because of space issues. Nobody was buying it. For the first time, it wasn't me on the defensive. It was her, and she was losing. The fallout kept spreading. The more people found out what happened, the worse it got for my mom. Relatives who normally stayed out of drama were suddenly involved, asking questions, making calls, wanting to know why I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving. At first, she tried damage control, acting like it was all just a big misunderstanding, but the problem was too many people already knew the truth. My cousin had told me the real reason. My grandmother had confronted her directly, and on top of that, I had receipts, screenshots of her messages in the group chat. The more she tried to spin the situation, the more people started seeing through her. Then she switched tactics. Instead of trying to fix things, she decided to double down. She announced she was hosting a private family dinner the night before Thanksgiving. No big gathering, no extended family, just the ones who still wanted to be together. Translation: a dinner for the people who still supported her. At first I didn't care. She could have her little event, and I'd still be hosting my own Thanksgiving with the relatives who actually wanted me there. But then I started hearing things from family members. Apparently, my mom had started calling around trying to guilt-trip people into going to her dinner instead of mine. She told some of them that I was being cruel by excluding her from my event, that I was the one dividing the family. That's when my dad finally called me. He sounded tired. He admitted he never agreed with what my mom did, that he thought it was wrong to leave me out. But he also said he didn't want to start a fight at the time, so he just stayed out of it. I asked him where he was spending Thanksgiving. He hesitated, then said he didn't know yet. That told me everything I needed to know. Meanwhile, my cousins were spilling even more tea. Turns out, this wasn't the first time my mom had prioritized appearances over actual family. Apparently, years ago she refused to invite one of my cousins to a Christmas party because she had bright pink hair at the time. Another cousin was once asked to change outfits before coming over for Easter because my mom thought her dress was too casual for the photos. So yeah, this wasn't new behavior. It just happened to be my turn this time. As Thanksgiving got closer, the pressure on my mom started getting worse. The relatives who sided with me weren't backing down, and now she was losing people she never expected to. One of my aunts, who originally took my side, suddenly switched back. She sent me a long message about how she understood both sides and that she thought family unity should come first. She was still going to my mom's dinner. I didn't respond. Thanksgiving finally rolled around, and I expected things to feel weird. But honestly, my dinner was a massive success. My house was full. More people showed up than I expected. Some cousins brought friends. A few family members who hadn't picked a side decided to come last minute. Even my grandparents, who normally tried to avoid family drama, came over. We ate, we talked, we laughed. It was probably the most relaxed holiday I've had in years. No stress, no fake family politics, just good food and good company. Then, later that night, my phone buzzed. A long message from my mom. It was exactly what I expected. She accused me of ruining Thanksgiving and turning everyone against her. She claimed that she never meant to hurt me, that she was just trying to make the holiday nice for everyone. But then, at the end, she flipped it back around, telling me that I was the one being cruel, that I destroyed our family over a chair. I stared at the message for a while, then instead of replying, I just screenshot it and posted it online. I didn't add any commentary. No captions, just the message as it was. Over the next few days, more people started commenting. Some called her out immediately, while others were hesitant, unsure of what to believe. Family friends saw it. Some relatives commented on it. Even people who had been on the fence before started realizing just how far she was willing to go to twist the narrative. By the next day, it wasn't just me calling her out anymore. It was everyone. That's when my dad finally broke his silence. For the first time, he didn't just stay quiet. I could hear something different in his voice. He was frustrated. I got a text from my sister saying my dad had called a family meeting. He told everyone he was done covering for her, that what she did was wrong, and that she needed to take responsibility instead of blaming me. Apparently, she didn't take it well. She screamed at him, called him a traitor, blamed him for letting things get this far. But for once, he didn't back down. The last message I got from my mom was short. If you can't even try to fix this, then don't bother calling me again. I didn't respond, and she hasn't messaged me since. For the first time in my life, I don't care. Thanksgiving morning started with chaos. I woke up to my phone buzzing non-stop. Missed calls, unread messages, all from different family members. Something was wrong. The first message I opened was from my cousin Dude. Your mom is telling people your Thanksgiving dinner is canceled. That woke me up real fast. More texts were coming in, relatives asking if my dinner was still happening, some saying they were confused because my mom had told them I called the whole thing off. A couple even sounded disappointed, like they had just assumed it was true and didn't bother checking with me first. I didn't even hesitate. I opened the family group chat and wrote, "Just to be clear, my dinner is not canceled. If anyone told you otherwise, they're lying." Within seconds, my mom replied, "Oh, sweetheart, I just heard a rumor that you canceled, and I was trying to clear things up. No need to get upset." Right. A rumor that she personally started. I ignored her and started making calls. I wasn't about to let her mess this up. I called every single person who had texted me, making sure they knew the dinner was still happening. Some of them were clearly thrown off, but once they heard from me directly, they confirmed they were still coming. While I was doing damage control, my dad called. He sounded exhausted. He admitted he knew what my mom was doing, and that she had been talking about it for days. She wanted my dinner to fail. She thought if people believed it was canceled, they'd just go to hers instead. I asked him why he didn't stop her. He didn't have a good answer, just something about not wanting to make things worse. I told him straight up, either you come to my dinner or you're enabling this. He didn't respond right away. I hung up. I didn't have time for excuses. By the time people started arriving at my place, the energy was completely different from last year. No tense family drama, no weird comments about appearances, no pressure to act a certain way, just people eating, talking, and actually enjoying Thanksgiving. Then, something unexpected happened. My grandparents showed up. They never pick sides, ever. They always stay neutral, even when it makes no sense to do so. So the fact that they actually chose to come to my dinner instead of my mom's, that was huge. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. People were taking pictures, posting on social media, tagging each other. Word was spreading fast. While my house was full of people actually enjoying themselves, my mom's dinner was apparently a disaster. She had spent so much time trying to ruin my plans that she hadn't realized her own event was falling apart. Not enough people showed up. Some of the ones who did were only there out of guilt. And on top of that, my dad didn't go. For the first time in years, he actually chose to stand up to her. I found out later that my mom lost it. She started calling relatives, demanding to know why they betrayed her. She called my dad a weak coward for not backing her up. She even told one of my cousins that I was manipulative for making her look bad. Like she needed any help with that. And then, because she can never just leave things alone, she did the one thing every toxic family member does when they're losing control. She took it to Facebook. She posted a long emotional rant about how I had embarrassed her and turned people against her, acting as if she was the real victim. She claimed she did everything she could to make things right, but that I refused to forgive her. Then came the worst part. She started talking about my wheelchair. She made it seem like I was the one pushing the family away because I was bitter about my accident and was taking my anger out on the people who loved me most. She made it sound like she was the real victim. It backfired instantly. People in the comments were not having it. Family friends called her out for twisting the story. Some of my cousins jumped in, telling everyone exactly what really happened. A few of her usual supporters tried defending her, but the backlash was too strong. And then the final blow, my dad commented on her post. He told her she needed to stop lying. He said that she had excluded me, not the other way around, that she had spent weeks trying to sabotage my Thanksgiving instead of fixing things, and that she had no one to blame but herself. She deleted the post within minutes, but by then it was too late. Screenshots were already being shared, people were talking, and her perfect image was shattered. The last message I got from her was short. "I hope you're happy." I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number. She doesn't deserve access to me anymore. A week after Thanksgiving, I thought the drama was finally dying down. My mom had gone quiet. My phone wasn't blowing up anymore, and most of the family had moved on. Then, out of nowhere, my dad called. He didn't start with small talk. He got straight to the point. "Your mom wants to apologize." I didn't say anything at first. He told me she was feeling bad about how things turned out and wanted to meet in person to talk. He said he wasn't trying to pressure me, but he thought I should at least hear her out. I wasn't buying it. My mom didn't do apologies. She did damage control. But my dad sounded different this time, more serious than usual. So I agreed to meet under one condition. I wasn't going to their house. I wasn't going anywhere private. We would meet in public. A cafe near my place, neutral ground. She showed up late. When she walked in, she looked like she had been preparing for this moment. Tired expression, slow movements, deep sighs like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The kind of performance you'd expect from someone trying to play the victim before the conversation even started. She sat down, folded her hands on the table, and started with the usual script. "I just want to say I'm sorry for how things turned out. Not I'm sorry for what I did. Not I was wrong to exclude you. Just sorry for how things turned out." She went on about how Thanksgiving had been so hard for her, how she never expected things to spiral like this, how the family was now so divided, and how she missed me. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. Then she shifted tactics. She started talking about how she felt so alone on Thanksgiving, how the dinner at her house was quiet and not the same without me there. She even said she had tried her best but that people kept turning against her. It was clear what she was doing. This wasn't an apology. This was a guilt trip. I cut her off. I told her if she was here to actually apologize, then she needed to do it. Straight up, no excuses. No talking about herself, just admit what she did was wrong. She didn't like that. Her face changed in an instant, like a switch flipped. The tired, emotional act disappeared, and the frustration came through. She tried to laugh it off at first, acting like I was being harsh about the whole thing. Then, when I didn't budge, she leaned forward and whispered, "Are you really going to hold a grudge over this?" Grudge? That word made it clear she still didn't get it. I told her this wasn't about a grudge. It was about her actions. She deliberately excluded me. Then, when I called her out, she tried to make me the villain. She spread lies, tried to sabotage my dinner, and threw a pity party online when it all backfired. She rolled her eyes, literally. Then she snapped. She started listing everything she's done for me over the years. How she raised me, how she helped me through my accident, how she only wanted the best for the family. That's when my dad finally stepped in. He had been quiet up until that point, just watching the conversation unfold. But now, he put his coffee down and looked straight at her. He told her, point blank, "You're still not taking responsibility." For a second, she looked stunned, like she couldn't believe he was actually siding with me. Then came the last-ditch effort. She tried to flip the blame. She said I was being cruel for making her suffer like this, that I was enjoying watching her struggle. That's when I stood up. I looked at her and said, "This is why I don't trust you." And I walked out. She didn't follow me. By the time I got home, my phone was already lighting up again. The group chat was on fire. My mom was ranting about how I had humiliated her in front of my dad, about how I was being ungrateful and heartless. A few relatives tried to calm her down, but others weren't even bothering anymore. The cracks in her support were starting to show. A couple of them messaged me privately, saying they were done defending her. She still had her die-hard supporters. Of course, the same relatives who had backed her from the beginning were still making excuses, still telling me she's your mother, just forgive her. But a lot of people, they had seen enough. Then, because she never learns, she took it to Facebook again. This time it was one of those vague passive-aggressive posts. Something about how sometimes the people you love the most hurt you the deepest, and how true family forgives, even when it's hard. It barely got any likes. A few of her usual enablers commented, but most people ignored it. That's when I realized something. For the first time, I didn't care. I didn't care what she said. I didn't care if she played the victim online. I didn't care about fixing things anymore. I was done, and I've never felt lighter. Just when I thought my mom couldn't sink any lower, she found a new angle. A few days after the fake apology disaster, my phone started buzzing again. This time, it wasn't her. It was my cousins, sending me screenshots. My mom had taken the drama to Facebook again. But this time, she wasn't just playing the victim. She was using my disability to get sympathy. Her post was long, emotional, and full of absolute lies. She claimed she was devastated because I was pushing away the only family who ever loved me. She talked about how she had done so much for me after my accident, how she had sacrificed everything to help me adjust, how she had always fought for me, and now I had turned on her. She made it sound like I was angry about my disability and that I was taking it out on her. She didn't mention Thanksgiving. She didn't mention excluding me. She didn't mention sabotaging my dinner, lying about it being canceled, or publicly shaming me when it backfired. She twisted the entire situation into her being the loving, devoted mother who was heartbroken because her disabled son wanted nothing to do with her, and some people fell for it. The usual crowd, her close friends, a few of the family members who had taken her side, started commenting things like, "You're such a good mother, and he'll come around, just give him time." But this time, there were a lot fewer comments, because more people were starting to question her. Some of her own friends replied asking what actually happened. A few people pointed out that Thanksgiving had been a mess and she was leaving out details. And then there were the comments from my cousins, people who were at my dinner, who saw everything firsthand. They called her out. They told the real story. They pointed out how she had lied, how she had excluded me, how she tried to sabotage my event, and how she only started apologizing when people turned against her. And that's when it all started falling apart. Her post did not go the way she planned. Instead of getting pity, she started getting questions. More relatives started messaging me privately, telling me they had no idea things were this bad. Some of them had believed my mom at first, but now that they were hearing both sides, they weren't so sure anymore. And then my dad finally snapped. Apparently, he saw the Facebook post too, and for the first time, he actually called her out publicly. He commented underneath, telling her to stop twisting the truth. He said she had left out a lot of important details and that she needed to stop acting like she was the victim. The comment section exploded. My mom lost it. She lashed out at everyone who questioned her. She accused people of being brainwashed by me. She said they were turning against their own blood. She even told one of my cousins they were being disrespectful for siding with me. At this point, her support was crumbling, and then Aunt Lisa showed up. Remember Aunt Lisa, the one who helped exclude me from Thanksgiving in the first place? She suddenly decided to switch sides. She wrote a comment saying this has all gone too far and that she never meant for anyone to get hurt. She claimed she had only gone along with it because she thought it would be easier for everyone. Nobody bought it. The internet was not having it. I didn't even need to say anything at this point. People were dragging my mom in the comments. Random strangers were replying to her post with questions she couldn't answer. Some of them even pulled up screenshots from her previous Facebook rants and pointed out all the contradictions. She tried deleting comments. Then she tried playing the victim again. Then she just deleted the entire post. By the end of the day, I had even more family members cutting contact with her. Some of them didn't say anything directly, but I could tell. They stopped liking her posts, stopped responding to her messages, and just quietly distanced themselves. I thought that would be the end of it. But she wasn't done. She tried to call me. I let it go to voicemail. The message she left was something else. She tried switching gears again, acting like she just wanted to clear the air. She said this has all gotten out of hand, and that she just wanted to talk. I didn't call back. I didn't text her. I didn't respond at all. Because for the first time, I realized I didn't have to. For the first time in years, I felt completely free from her control. She couldn't guilt trip me anymore. She couldn't manipulate the story anymore. She had tried everything, playing the victim, sabotaging me, twisting my disability into a sob story, blaming everyone but herself, and none of it worked. I wasn't chasing her approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for a real apology. I wasn't giving her another chance. She made her choice. And now, I'm making mine. I'm done. Weeks passed with complete silence. No texts, no calls, no Facebook posts about being betrayed. It was almost unsettling. After everything, it seemed like my mom had finally given up. Then, out of nowhere, a text popped up on my phone. "You'll regret this when I'm gone." No context. No follow-up. Just that. A few minutes later, another message came through. This time, it was longer. She vaguely hinted at a health issue, saying stress was making her feel worse. She didn't give details, just enough to make people worry. She said the family was falling apart and that all she wanted was for things to go back to how they used to be. This was a new level of manipulation. She had tried guilt, sabotage, public humiliation, twisting my disability against me. Now, she was using her own health as a weapon. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent a message to my dad. "Is Mom sick?" His response came almost immediately. "No, she's fine. She's just been upset about the fallout." Exactly what I thought. By the time I checked the family group chat, the damage had already started. Some relatives were panicking, rushing to her side, asking what was wrong. A few were even messaging me, saying no matter what happened, she's still your mother. Then came the Facebook post. She wrote a long emotional rant about how her own son didn't care if she died. She made it sound like I had abandoned her in her darkest time, that she had sacrificed everything for me, and now I wouldn't even check on her when she was sick. She never mentioned what the illness was. No specifics. Just enough drama to get people worried. In the group chat, I typed out 2 words. Stop lying, Mom. Silence. Then, people started asking questions. What illness? When were you diagnosed? Are you getting treatment? The cracks in her story started to show. Suddenly, she changed her tune. When people asked for specifics, she got defensive, insisting that people were overreacting to her words. She blamed people twisting her words, and insisted that she was just exhausted from all the pain this family has been through. Some of her supporters were still clinging to her side, but a lot of them, they were done. Even the ones who had defended her before were starting to distance themselves. For years she had played these games, lied, twisted things, manipulated people into feeling bad for her. But now, it wasn't working anymore. Her own allies were losing patience. And then the final blow, my dad left. After everything, after years of enabling her, covering for her, telling me to keep the peace, he finally reached his limit. He told her he couldn't deal with the drama anymore and that he needed space. He packed a bag and moved out for a while. That was it. That was the beginning of the end. I didn't respond to any more messages. I didn't entertain any more of her games. Instead, I focused on my life. Christmas rolled around, and for the first time in years, I had a completely peaceful holiday. No stress, no walking on eggshells, no dramatic phone calls or last-minute family fights. Just a quiet, happy holiday surrounded by people who actually cared about me. And I've never been happier. Weeks passed without any more drama. No more text from my mom, no cryptic Facebook posts, no sudden guilt trips. After everything, it finally felt like things were settling down. Then, my dad reached out. He wanted to meet. Alone. It wasn't like before, where he'd try to convince me to hear her out or find a way to move forward. This time there was no pressure in his voice. No attempt to smooth things over. Just a simple request. I need to talk to you. I agreed. We met at a quiet diner, the kind of place that barely had any customers in the afternoon. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't been sleeping well. He sat down, took a long breath and finally said, "I think you deserve to know the truth." Then, he told me everything. My mom had always been obsessed with appearances, but it wasn't just about vanity, it was how she was raised. She grew up in a house where image was everything. Her parents, my grandparents, weren't just strict. They were cold. They didn't care about emotions, about kindness, about family bonds. They only cared about how things looked to other people. She was expected to be perfect, not just well-behaved, not just successful, flawless. Any mistake, any failure, any imperfection was something to be hidden. When she was a teenager, she struggled in school. Instead of getting her help, her parents pretended it wasn't happening. When she had a health issue in her early 20s, they refused to talk about it and acted like she was making it up. If something wasn't perfect, they erased it. And then, years later I ended up in a wheelchair. For my mom, it wasn't just an adjustment, it was something she didn't know how to handle. Her entire life, she had been trained to believe that anything different, anything outside of the perfect picture, was a problem that needed to be hidden. That was why she didn't want me at Thanksgiving. That was why she didn't want people seeing me. Because in her mind, I wasn't just her son. I was a reminder that her life wasn't perfect. I sat there, staring at my dad as he told me all of this. And for the first time, I felt something I didn't expect. I felt pity. Not enough to forgive her. Not enough to excuse what she did. But enough to understand that she was broken in a way I never realized before. My dad looked down at his coffee and admitted that he knew this about her for years. That he had seen how controlling she was, how much she cared about appearances over actual family. But he never stopped her. I let it happen. He apologized. Not just for the Thanksgiving mess. Not just for enabling her. For all of it. For standing by while she pushed me aside. For not stepping in when I needed him to. Then, he asked the question I knew was coming. Do you think there's any way to fix this? I didn't hesitate. No. For once he didn't try to argue. He just nodded. And then he told me something I wasn't expecting. He was leaving her. After weeks of tension, my dad finally admitted he couldn't do it anymore. He had spent too long pretending things were fine, and now, it was too much. He had already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce was happening. When my mom found out, she completely lost it. She went ballistic. She screamed at him, accused him of betraying her, of ruining the family. She blamed me, saying I had poisoned him against her. She called relatives, ranting about how I had destroyed everything. But this time, no one was listening. She had burned too many bridges, lied too many times, played the victim so often that people stopped caring. For the first time, she was alone. The last time I spoke to her, she was in full meltdown mode, spitting out every insult she could think of, trying to hurt me, trying to make me feel guilty. I let her finish. Then I told her one thing. I didn't destroy anything. You did. Then I walked away, and I never looked back. Months passed. No calls, no texts, no passive-aggressive Facebook posts. Nothing. It was the longest stretch of silence I'd ever had from my mother, and for the first time, it wasn't because she was trying to teach me a lesson or make me come crawling back. It was because she had no one left to manipulate. Without my dad around to cover for her, without her usual flying monkeys running interference, people finally started seeing her for who she really was. The divorce went through quietly. My dad didn't drag things out. He moved into a small apartment, started going to therapy, and cut ties with her completely. He stopped defending her, stopped making excuses. For the first time, he was just living his own life. Meanwhile, my mom's reputation was falling apart. For years, she had relied on carefully crafted lies to keep people in her corner. But now, no one believed her anymore. Aunts and uncles started distancing themselves. Some of them had been on the fence for a while, unsure of what to believe. But once my dad left, the truth became undeniable. Even the relatives who had defended her after Thanksgiving started avoiding her. Then, one day, a letter arrived. It was long. Pages and pages of carefully written words, as if she had agonized over every sentence. She called it a heartfelt apology, but it wasn't. It was more of the same. She talked about how much she missed me, how she never meant to hurt me, how she was willing to forgive everything if I would just come back into her life. She didn't acknowledge the things she had done. She didn't take responsibility. She just wanted control again. I read it once, then I threw it away. For the first time in my life, I felt free. There was no guilt, no second guessing, no voice in the back of my head telling me that maybe, just maybe, she could change. She wasn't going to change. I finally understood that. Instead of wasting my energy on her, I started focusing on my own life. I started therapy. I had always told myself that I was fine, that I had handled everything well enough on my own. But sitting down with a therapist and talking about everything, that changed everything. Years of emotional abuse, years of walking on eggshells, years of feeling like I had to earn my mother's love. I finally started processing all of it, and slowly, things started getting better. My relationships with my dad, my cousins, and my friends became stronger. Without my mom's influence hanging over everything, I was able to connect with people in a way I never had before. Holidays were peaceful. No tension, no stress, no sudden guilt trips or manipulative games. Just good food, good company, and real, genuine happiness. For the first time, I wasn't walking on eggshells. Then, one last attempt. A distant relative reached out. One I hadn't spoken to in years. Someone my mother had clearly sent. They started with the usual, she just wants to talk, and you know she loves you. Then came the guilt trip. Family is family, no matter what. I didn't argue. I didn't explain myself. I just responded with 2 words. I'm done. And that was it. The cycle was over. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I wasn't looking for closure. I had already found it. For the first time in my life, I don't need her. And I've never been happier. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and my relationship with my family has been strained for years. We were never outright hostile, but the distance was always there. Too many unresolved conflicts. Too many moments where I felt like an outsider in my own home. I had moved on, built my own life, and learned not to expect much from them. So, when I received an invitation to a family gathering, it caught me completely off guard. It wasn't just a casual get-together. The invitation was unexpected. A simple email from my parents inviting me to a family dinner. It felt odd since we hadn't spoken much in years, but part of me hoped this was an attempt at reconciliation. There was no mention of a specific occasion, no birthday, no anniversary, nothing. Just a date, a time, and a fancy banquet hall as the location. That alone was strange. My family had never done anything like this before. Most of our family gatherings were potlucks in someone's backyard or a basic dinner at a mid-tier restaurant. This looked like a full-blown event. I almost didn't go, but part of me, maybe the part that still wanted some kind of connection, thought this could be an olive branch. Maybe they were trying to mend things. Maybe this was their way of making an effort. I arrived at the venue and immediately knew something was off. The place was way too extravagant. We're talking a full catering service, professionally arranged decorations, a DJ playing soft background music, and a guest list that went way beyond just immediate family. My aunts, uncles, cousins, and even a few family friends were there. Some people I barely even knew nodded at me in recognition. My parents were unusually warm when they greeted me. My mom smiled too much. My dad clapped me on the back as if we were best buddies, and my siblings barely made eye contact. My younger brother was actively avoiding me, while my sister kept glancing at me and then whispering to someone at her table. I found my best friend who had also been invited. He looked just as confused as I felt. "Do you have any idea what this is about?" he asked. I didn't. Dinner was served, conversations flowed, and yet something was off. The energy in the room was tense, like people were waiting for something to happen. My parents seemed almost rehearsed in their interactions with me. Everything felt artificial. Then, my father stood up, holding his wine glass, and tapped a spoon against it. The room fell silent. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice full of forced emotion. "This is a very special evening for our family, an important moment for us all." I glanced at my best friend who raised an eyebrow. I could feel the shift in the room. Something big was coming. My father continued, "As you all know, family means everything to us. And sometimes, difficult decisions must be made for the good of the whole. A pit formed in my stomach. My father sighed and folded his hands. This isn't working anymore. We've decided as a family that it's best to go our separate ways. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then murmurs. People shifting in their seats, looking at each other. My best friend stiffened beside me. A few guests exchanged awkward glances. My brain struggled to catch up with what I had just heard. My mother took over, her voice soft and measured. This isn't meant to be cruel. This is something we believe is necessary for the well-being of our family. I could barely register the words. Then, my sister pulled out a folded paper and began reading from it. A list of my supposed offenses. Selfish, ungrateful, choosing outsiders over family, creating unnecessary conflict, refusing to contribute when asked, prioritizing personal interests over family needs. Each word slammed into me like a punch. Some people actually clapped. Not many, but enough for the sound to cut through the noise in my head. I scanned the room. Some looked mortified, others looked smug, and some just seemed relieved it wasn't them in my position. My hands curled into fists. What the hell is this? I finally managed to say. My father remained calm as if he had rehearsed this moment. We have prepared everything for a clean break, he said, gesturing to my mother, who pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. I didn't take it at first. My brain was still trying to process the humiliation, the sheer audacity of what was happening in front of everyone. Publicly. I grabbed the envelope and opened. Inside was a letter. Cold, clinical. You are no longer welcome at family gatherings. We have removed you from family documents and group communications. We wish you all the best in life. That was it. No real explanation. No apology. Just a calculated final severance. I looked at my parents, my siblings, the relatives who had gone along with this. My mother's expression was neutral. My father gave me a nod like he had just done something noble. My sister wouldn't meet my eyes. I couldn't even find the words. I tossed the envelope onto the table and walked out. My best friend followed, cursing under his breath. Behind us, the murmurs swelled. Some people rushed to talk to each other, whispering about what they had just witnessed. A few even tried to call out to me, but I ignored them. I walked out of that banquet hall, my pulse hammering in my ears, knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't about me, this was about control. And whatever their real reason was, I was going to find out. The banquet hall doors swung shut behind me, cutting off the murmurs and hushed whispers that filled the room. I didn't stop walking. My best friend kept pace beside me, silent but tense, while the night air hit me like a slap to the face. Somewhere behind us, I could hear people coming out, some leaving, some just stepping outside to watch. I ignored them. A distant voice called my name, but I didn't turn back. The envelope my parents had handed me was clenched in my fist. I hadn't even realized I was still holding it until I reached my car and slammed it against the hood. It made a loud slap against the metal before sliding onto the ground. My friend picked it up, looked at it for a second, then placed it back on the car. More people started filtering out of the building. Some avoided looking at me, others were whispering to each other, throwing glances in my direction. A cousin hesitated near the entrance, phone in hand, before disappearing back inside. My parents didn't come out, neither did my siblings. I got in my car and drove away. I didn't check my phone until later that night. When I did, my notifications were flooded. A cousin had recorded the whole thing. The video was already making rounds on social media. I opened the link and saw a shaky, dimly lit recording from the far side of the room. My father's voice echoed through the speakers. We have come to a decision as a family. The entire speech was there, from my sister reading off that ridiculous list to the awkward claps that followed. The video ended just as I stormed out. The comments were already rolling in. Some were people I knew, extended family, old friends, reacting with shock. Others were strangers. What kind of cult is this? Imagine throwing a whole party just to cut someone off. Insane. There's no way this is real. It feels staged. My phone buzzed again. A different cousin had messaged me. Dude, I had no idea this was going to happen. This was messed up. More messages followed. Some were from distant relatives. Some from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Most were variations of the same thing. I had no idea. Are you okay? What the hell was that? But one message stood out. My mom. I hesitated before opening it. The text was short. We did this for your own good. The family can finally heal now. I stared at the screen for a long time before putting my phone down. Over the next few weeks, the video gained traction. It started in family circles, then spread when someone anonymously posted about it online. It wasn't viral overnight, but slowly people started talking. The title, imagine getting invited to a party just to be disowned. I wasn't tagged, but I didn't have to be. People were already piecing things together. Then, at work, my worst fear was confirmed. One of my coworkers leaned over and asked, "Hey, isn't this you?" He tilted his phone to show me the video. Another coworker had already pulled it up. Someone across the office laughed awkwardly. A few of them started whispering. I didn't stay long that day. I finally opened the envelope that night. Inside was an official-looking document. It confirmed what I had already guessed. They had removed me from their will, explicitly uninvited me from future holidays, and stated that I was no longer considered a member of the family. It wasn't just words, it was legal. Formal. At the bottom, both my parents had signed their names. I checked my messages again. My brother and sister still hadn't responded. I sent them one last text. Is this really how you want this to go? Nothing. The family was now split. Some relatives were on my side, messaging me privately to say they were disgusted by what happened. Others doubled down, saying I had brought this on myself. One uncle reached out with something unexpected. He told me he had a spare room if I ever wanted to fully cut ties. You don't have to do this alone, he said. It was the first time in days that something felt real. Then came the final blow. My brother was getting married soon. I hadn't even known he was engaged. A mutual cousin sent me a screenshot of the wedding invite list. My name wasn't on it. That night, I stared at my phone for a long time. I started typing a message to my parents, to my siblings, to everyone. I wanted to say something, to fight back, to ask them what they were thinking, if they even cared. Then, before I could hit send, I deleted it. They had already made up their minds. The silence from my family should have been my answer, but I needed to know why. Why now? Why go through the effort of staging an entire event just to cut me off publicly? There had to be more to it. The first clue came from an unexpected message. A second cousin, someone I had only interacted with at family gatherings, sent me a cryptic text. You should look into what changed before the party. There's more to this than they're letting on. I asked what they meant, but they didn't respond. The moment I got home, I started digging. I remembered that my parents had once told me about the family estate. Checking the public property records confirmed my suspicions. My name had been removed just days before the dinner. It wasn't a coincidence. When I was younger, they had mentioned that one of the family properties, an old vacation house, would be passed down to me. I hadn't thought about it in years, but I checked the public property records just in case. My name was nowhere on it. Instead, the house had been quietly transferred to my younger brother a week before the party. That wasn't a coincidence. I kept looking. The second I saw the legal document date, I knew I needed professional help. I reached out to the lawyer who had handled my family's estate planning years ago. He wasn't our family lawyer anymore, but I figured it was worth a shot. He called me back the next day. He confirmed what I already suspected. My parents had changed their estate plan just before the party. Not only was I removed, but my younger brother and sister had been given larger shares than originally planned. My parents had also added a clause ensuring they would be financially taken care of for the rest of their lives, something that would have required me to support them before the change was made. In other words, they expected me to pay for their retirement. And when I didn't, they made sure I was out of the picture. It all started making sense. My parents had been laying the groundwork for months. My sister, the one who read off that ridiculous list at the party, had been pushing for this. The lawyer even mentioned that she had been the one pushing the hardest to change things. She told my parents I was too independent and wasn't contributing to the family. She painted me as the problem, making sure that when they cut me off, it would look justified. They needed me gone so no one would question the will changes. Then the second video surfaced. Someone else at the party had recorded a different angle. This time it showed my father and younger brother laughing just minutes before the announcement. They weren't nervous. They weren't conflicted. They were excited. The person who uploaded it didn't even tag me, but people recognized them immediately. The comments flooded in. They planned this like a damn theater production. Bro, they really threw a disownment party. The fact that they were laughing before the announcement is insane. More messages rolled in, this time from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Old acquaintances, former family friends. I always thought your dad was controlling, but this is a new level. Dude, your sister used to tell people you wouldn't fall in line with the family. I thought she was joking. Even one of my father's longtime friends reached out. I didn't know they were going to do that to you. If I had known, I wouldn't have gone. At this point, I had enough. I sent my father a text. No small talk, no pretense. Just one question, was this all about money? His response came fast, it's about what's best for the family. That was all I needed to see. By then, the internet had caught on. People had started digging into my family's history of manipulation. Old stories resurfaced, times when my father had financially cut off other relatives, when my sister had tried to control people through guilt. A deep dive thread popped up on Reddit, piecing everything together. His family cut him off right after changing their will. The brother got the property that was meant for OP. The sister pushed for this for months. The parents were laughing before the announcement. This wasn't a sudden decision. This was a long con. And then the final warning came in. The lawyer I had spoken to messaged me again. I'm going to be honest with you. If your parents are willing to cut you off this publicly, they might also try to make sure you can't contest the will in the future. They might legally block you from making any claims. My younger brother and sister must have gotten nervous, because within an hour they removed me from social media. No explanation. Just gone. It was damage control. They didn't want to be associated with me anymore because they knew things were about to get worse. That night, for the first time, the rage actually set in. I had let a lot of things slide in my life. I had ignored years of being treated like I wasn't part of the family. But this was deliberate. They had planned this for months. They wanted me gone because I refused to be their financial backup plan. I started considering my options, exposing them publicly, taking legal action. Both, I had everything I needed. The evidence, the messages, the videos, the legal changes. I just had to decide if I wanted to use them. I had the receipts, the legal documents, the messages, the videos. Every piece of evidence showed exactly how my family had planned to cut me off, rewrite the will, and make me look like the villain. For days I debated what to do with it. I could stay quiet and let them get away with it, or I could tell my side of the story. I chose to tell my side. I wrote everything out in a Reddit post, laying out the timeline, the invitation, the staged humiliation, the will changes, the second video of my dad and brother laughing, the messages from my sister admitting that I was cut off because I was too independent. I attached screenshots, redacting names for privacy but leaving enough details to make it clear I wasn't lying. I hit post. I went to sleep thinking maybe a few hundred people would read it. I woke up to viral chaos. My post had exploded overnight. Thousands of upvotes. Hundreds of awards. Comments flying in faster than I could read them. This is some next-level villain origin story material. They literally threw a party to disown you. I'm still stuck on that. Your family is the corporate version of if you're not useful, you don't exist. People weren't just reacting, they were digging. Reddit users started piecing together timelines, cross-referencing legal details, and calling out the sheer absurdity of what happened. Some even made TikToks breaking down the situation. Then, my siblings saw it. First, my brother blocked me on everything. He was already avoiding me, but this made it official. My sister followed right after, but not before posting something vague on Facebook. Some people have no shame airing private family matters online. Real family knows the truth. She deleted it after an hour, when the comment section tore her apart. Then, I got another message. An aunt who had stayed silent until now sent me a long text. She confirmed that the inheritance changes had been planned for months. She had overheard conversations where my sister was actively convincing my parents that I didn't deserve anything since I wasn't part of the family anymore. She didn't agree with what happened, but she also didn't want to get involved. Typical. Meanwhile, my parents went into full damage control. First, my dad tried calling. When I didn't pick up, he left a voicemail. The tone was controlled, almost rehearsed. He never denied what I posted, just said I was misunderstanding things and that I should have talked to him privately. Minutes later, an email came in. Long paragraphs about how I was being irrational and disrespectful to my family, how he never wanted this but that I was forcing his hand by making everything public. I didn't respond. Then, more secrets started coming out. A different relative reached out and casually mentioned, "Oh, I thought you already knew your childhood home was sold months ago." I didn't. I had assumed my parents still owned the house I grew up in, but they had sold it without telling me. Another financial move they didn't want me to question. At this point, it was clear they had been planning for a long time to wipe me off the map. I later found out that my sister had been discussing my removal with other relatives for weeks. One cousin forwarded me a message where she justified it, saying, "It's not personal, but it was the only way to keep things fair." It read, "I don't feel bad. He wouldn't let us control him, and this was the only way to handle it." I screenshot it immediately. My sister went into panic mode. She started calling people, trying to spin a new narrative. But the damage was already done. The internet did what the internet does. TikTok and Twitter picked up the story. People were making reaction videos, analyzing the situation, debating whether my family was a cult or just money hungry. Even people who didn't believe the full story couldn't ignore the videos. The clips from the party, the awkward clapping, the second footage of my father laughing, it was too real to be faked. Then, the workplace fallout started. Someone at my job brought it up in the break room. The conversation was loud enough that I couldn't ignore it. "Oh my God, I saw that story on Reddit." Wait, wasn't it? Someone else hushed them, but it was too late. For the next week, I could feel the side glances. The awkward pauses when I walked in, not judgmental, just curious. Strangely, most people supported me. A coworker even admitted they had a family just like mine. Still, having my personal life become public knowledge at work was weird. Then, another message came in. An old neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. They told me that my father had done this before. Years ago, another family member had been financially cut off after questioning my dad's decisions. They had been erased the same way I had, completely removed from the family. History was repeating itself. At this point, I knew I had one option left. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer. I didn't know if I could challenge the will, but I needed to know what my rights were. Then, my father finally snapped. A final text. Short, cold, "You've ruined this family's reputation. I hope you regret this." It was followed minutes later by a text from my mother. A long message, guilt-tripping, telling me how she never wanted this and how I was tearing the family apart. Neither of them ever denied the money moves. Neither of them apologized. They just wanted me to shut up. I didn't reply. For the first time I knew, I didn't owe them anything, and now I was ready to fight back. I sat across from the lawyer, going over every detail. Challenging a will wasn't easy, he explained, but there were loopholes. If I could prove that the changes had been made under fraudulent circumstances, like coercion or undue influence, there was a case. The fact that my parents rewrote everything a week before cutting me off publicly, that was suspicious. Then a bombshell dropped. A cousin, one of the few family members who still spoke to me, sent a message. Your brother and sister knew about the will changes for months. Your dad promised them extra money if they agreed not to fight him on it. My siblings weren't just bystanders in this. They had actively agreed to let me get erased in exchange for a bigger cut. Meanwhile, social media was still eating my family alive. My sister, clearly frustrated, made a vague post about entitled people who think they deserve handouts. It backfired instantly. People recognized her from the viral posts. The comments called her out. Oh, you mean like how you helped steal your brother's inheritance? You literally threw a party to cut someone off. Sit this one out. Didn't your text messages already expose you? LMAO, she deleted the post within an hour. Then, another piece of evidence landed in my lap. A different cousin messaged me with a screenshot from my father, one he had sent before the will was changed. It was a direct admission that they were rewriting everything not because of anything I did, but out of spite. If he won't support this family, then he doesn't deserve to be part of it. That was it. Proof that this wasn't about my behavior. It was about control. The next day, things escalated in a way I didn't expect. My father called my workplace. He tried to spin a new narrative, told them that I was mentally unstable, that I had a history of erratic behavior, and that they should be concerned about my actions. Luckily, my boss wasn't an idiot. He pulled me aside, told me exactly what had been said, and reassured me that my job was safe. But now, this was personal. My parents weren't just trying to cut me off, they were trying to ruin my life. While that was happening, the extended family was imploding. A huge fight broke out in the family group chat. Some relatives were furious at my parents for what they had done, while others sided with them. The ones against them were starting to realize the full picture. Wait, so you guys changed the will and then cut him off publicly to cover your tracks? How do you disown your own kid and still try to control his life? That's insane. I had no idea it was this bad. Others doubled down. He embarrassed the family. He got what he deserved. He should have been grateful. Now look at him crying online for attention. The chat devolved into chaos, and by the end of it, half of the family left the group entirely. Then, a journalist reached out. The story had spread so much online that a local news site was interested. They wanted to do a piece on toxic family dynamics and financial manipulation. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go that far yet, but the fact that it was big enough for media attention, that meant my parents were feeling the pressure. And sure enough, they tried to fix it the only way they knew how. Money. I got a message from my father. We're willing to discuss a small settlement if you agree to take everything down and stop talking about this. A bribe. My lawyer's response. That means they know they're on shaky legal ground. They wouldn't offer anything if they weren't worried. Then, the ultimatum came, a final message from my father. If you remove all posts and publicly apologize to the family, we will consider giving you something. They didn't want to make things right. They wanted me to admit fault publicly so they could regain control of the narrative. I didn't even hesitate. I leaked the message online. The backlash was instant. Even relatives who had been neutral started backing away from my parents. Wait, so they're only offering money if you apologize. This was never about fairness. They really just want to shut you up. This is disgusting. The fact that they're still trying to manipulate you after all this, they deserve to lose everything. At this point, even the people who had defended them were quiet. Then my sister snapped. She sent one last message, a rant filled with insults, calling me pathetic for airing dirty laundry and saying she hoped I never saw a cent of the family money. That message? I saved it. Screenshotted, documented. She had just proved she didn't want fairness. She wanted me to suffer. I had seen enough. I called my lawyer and told him to move forward. I wasn't just going to challenge the will. I was going to make sure they never did this to anyone else again. The legal wheels were in motion. My lawyer sent an official request for all documents related to the will changes. My parents now had to respond. No more ignoring. No more controlling the narrative. Then the first cracks appeared. A week after my lawyer sent the request, my father started panicking. Someone in the family let it slip that he was furious about the cost of the legal process. He had assumed that cutting me off would be clean and simple. He never thought I would fight back, and he definitely never expected me to lawyer up. Turns out, even with the will rewritten, they still had to prove in court that everything was done fairly. And with the amount of evidence I had, that was going to be a problem for them. At first, my brother stood by my parents, but as the legal battle dragged on and pressure mounted, his confidence wavered. He reached out to me once, indirectly asking if we could fix this before it got worse. But I ignored him. He had already made his choice. A message popped up from an unknown number. It was him. He wasn't apologizing. He wasn't admitting guilt, but he was clearly scared. He didn't want to be dragged into a lawsuit and wanted to know if there was a way to settle things quietly. I ignored it. If he was nervous now, it meant things were finally getting real. Not long after, my mother made her move. A handwritten letter arrived at my door. No text, no email, just old-fashioned emotional manipulation in an envelope. She wrote about how she missed me, how she never wanted things to turn out this way, how she just wanted peace in the family. It was carefully worded. She never denied what they did. She never took responsibility. She just wanted me to drop everything. I didn't respond. If she really wanted peace, she would have never let things escalate this far. By this point, the family was officially at war. My parents started cutting off any relatives who supported me. They removed people from group chats, refused to answer calls, and made it clear that if you weren't on their side, you weren't part of the family. Some aunts and uncles distanced themselves from the drama, not wanting to pick a side. Others, they started speaking up. Then, something I never expected happened. My father's own brother, my uncle, reached out. He had been quiet throughout this whole mess, never getting involved. But now, he wanted to help. He had seen this play out before. My father had done something similar years ago to another relative, and my uncle was done staying silent. He told me he was willing to testify. That changed everything. Now, it wasn't just my word against my parents, it was their own sibling calling them out. Then the next bombshell dropped. Through some financial digging, my lawyer found out that my father had already spent part of the inheritance. He had assumed that I wouldn't fight back, so he got comfortable. That meant if I won the case, they were going to have a very big financial hole to fill. It also meant that my brother and sister might not even get the money they were promised. That's when I got the next message from my brother. He was rethinking everything. Around the same time, the journalist covering the story confirmed they were moving forward with the article. The piece wasn't just about my family, it was about inheritance battles, financial manipulation, and controlling family dynamics. But my parents knew exactly who the inspiration was. That's when my father snapped. Another text message came in. No more pretending. No more manipulation. Just pure anger. You are dead to me. Enjoy being alone forever. It was the final official cutoff. Then, he made a mistake. Because after sending that text, my father's rage got the best of him. He went into the family group chat and ranted about how I was ruining everything. My sister, who had been fighting so hard to control the story, was mortified. She left the group chat immediately. I took a screenshot of my father's message. Then, I posted it online. No added commentary, no extra words, just his own words, exposing exactly who he was. This time, even the people who had been defending my family went quiet. Then the good news came. My lawyer reviewed everything. The will changes, the timing, the manipulation, and now the uncle willing to testify. The case was even stronger than we thought. The will changes were clearly not made in good faith. My father had proven his own bad intentions, and now, there was a real chance they wouldn't be able to keep everything. My brother, who had ignored me for months, who had agreed to cut me out, sent another message. This time, he wasn't looking for a quiet settlement. He was rethinking his involvement completely. I didn't know it would go this far. He was realizing that siding with my parents might have been a mistake. I still didn't reply. He made his choice. With the legal battle getting serious, my parents' reputation started taking hits. People who used to be close to them stopped talking to them. Family friends distanced themselves. They weren't just losing money now, they were losing social support. They had spent their lives building an image. Now, that image was crumbling. I didn't let myself get distracted. Instead of getting caught up in their meltdowns and manipulation, I stayed focused. The case was moving forward, and I was ready to see this through to the end. Case was officially filed. My lawyer submitted the paperwork, forcing my parents to provide full documentation of all financial changes, including the altered will, account transfers, and property movements. They had no choice now. They had to answer. Then, the real damage started. A week after filing, my lawyer dug into the financial records. What he found was worse than we expected. There were discrepancies. Large amounts of money had been withdrawn before the will was changed, more than what my parents should have had access to. The timeline was damning. My father had moved huge sums right before he officially disowned me. This wasn't just about cutting me off. He had been siphoning money before making it official. If the court found fraud, my father could be held legally accountable. The moment my father received notice that the financial records would be reviewed, he started scrambling. Suddenly, family members started getting calls. My parents were trying to do damage control, making excuses, spinning the situation to make it look like I was the problem. But the money trail didn't lie. They had spent years making sure everything looked like it was done fairly. But now, their entire plan was falling apart. I had assumed my brother was regretting his involvement. He had reached out before, nervous about being dragged into the case. Then he flipped. He fully sided with my parents, going as far as calling me a money-hungry traitor in a family chat. He made it public, calling me out for tearing the family apart over money. But he forgot one thing. I didn't start this. They threw a party to cut me off. They changed the will in secret. And now, they were trying to act like I was the bad guy. His rant backfired. People in the chat started pushing back. So you're okay with the fact that Dad moved money before the will was even changed? If OP was so selfish, why did they have to bribe you to stay quiet? This doesn't make OP look bad. It makes you look guilty. He left the group chat after that. Not long after, I got a voicemail. 10 minutes. It was my mother sobbing. She was hysterical, talking about how I had ruined the family, how she couldn't believe I would do this, how I was breaking her heart. But nowhere in that voicemail did she deny what they did. Nowhere did she apologize. It was just another attempt at guilt tripping. I deleted it. While my brother was imploding publicly, my sister got exposed privately. Someone who used to be her friend messaged me with something interesting. She had been spending inheritance money before the will was even finalized. Before I was officially cut off, she had been making large purchases. She had been so sure that I wouldn't fight back that she had already started spending her extra cut. Screenshots of messages leaked. where she bragged about getting more money because I was finally gone. Once those messages spread, people started turning on her. Even the relatives who were neutral started realizing just how calculated this all was. She stopped posting online completely. Then my father tried one last desperate move. I got a message. "We can offer a payout if you agree to drop the case immediately." They had spent months acting like I was the problem, like I was selfish, and now they were offering me money just to shut up. I forwarded it to my lawyer. His response: "This just strengthens your case. They know they're losing." My father tried to fight back. He filed a counter motion to dismiss my case, claiming it was baseless and that the will changes were fair. The judge rejected it immediately. They had no solid evidence. The legal battle took months. My lawyer filed paperwork, and my parents pushed back with their own legal team, trying to delay the process. But eventually, they had to answer. Then another relative stepped forward. This wasn't just my uncle. This was someone who had also been cut out of the will. They had assumed they had no power to fight back, but now that I was challenging it, they were willing to testify. This wasn't just about me anymore. My parents had been manipulating people for years. Now, they were losing control. My father had spent years building a reputation. Business connections, social circles, he had always made sure people saw him as a respected man. But now, his business connections were distancing themselves. People were hearing about the lawsuit, about the inheritance fraud, about the fact that he had stolen from his own child. He wasn't just losing family support, he was losing social credibility. For someone like him, that was worse than money. Then another message from my brother. He was realizing the legal mess he was in. He regretted getting involved. He was too deep now. He had publicly defended my father, called me out, tried to make me the bad guy, and now he wanted to step back. But it was too late. He made his choice. At this point, I had nothing left to lose. I told my lawyer to push for everything. Expose the financial fraud. Expose the inheritance theft. Expose the years of manipulation. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about making sure they never did this to anyone else again. The legal case had reached its boiling point. My father had done everything in his power to block, delay, and manipulate. But now, the judge wasn't having it. In a major court ruling, my father was ordered to disclose all financial documents related to the inheritance. Every bank transfer, every account change, every suspicious transaction, it all had to be laid bare. That's when the real damage started. My lawyer went through the financial records. It didn't take long to find something huge: a hidden bank account. Thousands of dollars had been stored away, money that was originally meant for me. It was clear fraud. My father had moved funds before disowning me, thinking that once I was out of the picture, no one would question it. But now, it was all coming out. Once this information was exposed, my brother started spiraling. He had spent the last few months siding with my parents, calling me a traitor for fighting back. But now, he was caught. When confronted about the hidden account, he tried to downplay it, acted like he didn't know. But his reaction was off. He was too defensive. Then my lawyer found something else. There was evidence that my brother had accessed the account. He had benefited from the stolen money. Now, he was in legal trouble too. Then my mother made her move. A call came in. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was shaky, a mix of desperation and guilt. She begged me to drop the case, to just move on and let the family heal. She didn't deny what they did. She didn't take responsibility. She just wanted me to let them get away with it. This time, I didn't ignore it. I sent her a message, short, to the point. I told her that I saw through the manipulation, that I would never trust them again, that she and my father had dug their own grave. There was no coming back from this. While my mother was begging, my sister was raging. She posted a full-blown rant online, a long rambling post about how family should always come first, and how some people care too much about money. She was losing it. The comments, not on her side. "Girl, weren't you caught spending inheritance money before the will was finalized? You threw a party to cut your brother off. Sit this one out. Your own messages exposed you. Maybe stop talking." She deleted the post within hours. While my sister was imploding online, my father's business reputation was collapsing. Word had gotten around. Business partners distanced themselves. Some canceled deals. He was losing money fast. He had spent years building his image, but now, everyone was seeing him for what he really was, and he couldn't handle it. The extended family was done. Some relatives had tried to stay neutral, but now, they couldn't ignore the evidence. A few cut off my parents completely. Others outright said they wanted nothing to do with them. The family name was tarnished, all because they got greedy. Then, another message from my brother. This time, he was backtracking hard. "I didn't know it would go this far. Maybe we can settle privately." He had spent months mocking me, publicly defending my parents. And now he wanted out. I ignored it. He made his choice. Then, the final blow to my sister. A cousin leaked messages proving that she had known about the will changes from the start. She had been actively involved. She had told my parents that I was too independent and wasn't contributing. She was the one pushing them to cut me out. And now, everyone knew. My lawyer sat me down and gave me a choice. I could continue with full litigation, take them to court and expose everything. Or, I could negotiate a private settlement. Either way, my parents were going to lose. Then, my father made one last attempt to take control. A final message. Settle now or you're disowned forever. I laughed when I read it. They had already cut me out. They had already humiliated me. They had already treated me like I was nothing. Now, they were pretending like I had something to lose. I posted one final update online. I publicly stated that I had no interest in being part of their toxic family ever again. The response? Good for you. They already disowned you. What else can they do? The only people who lost something here are them. The judge's warning at the next hearing. The judge issued a warning. If more financial fraud was found, my father could face criminal charges. His face went pale. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. Now, it was about actual legal consequences. The case was reaching its final stretch. My father was cornered. My mother was begging. My sister was hiding. My brother was regretting. And me? I was ready to finish this. The case had been dragging on for months, but now, it was finally time. The final heat. The last showdown. The moment everything came to light. The courtroom was silent as my lawyer presented the full scope of the fraud. The hidden bank account. The misuse of funds before the will was even changed. The manipulation tactics used to cut me out. The evidence was undeniable. My father sat there, face like stone. My brother looked shaken. My mother stared at the table. My sister, nowhere to be seen. Then, the judge made the final ruling. My father had acted dishonestly. The judge ordered him to return a portion of the inheritance money to me. I had won. The moment the ruling was made, my brother broke. Tears, shaking hands, full breakdown. He realized exactly what he had done. He had chosen the wrong side. He had publicly defended our parents, called me a traitor, sided against me. And now, he had lost everything. His money, his reputation, his relationship with me. He didn't even try to talk to me after the hearing. He just sat there staring ahead like his entire world had just collapsed. The moment the ruling went public, my sister vanished from social media. No more cryptic posts. No more passive-aggressive rants about loyalty. She knew everyone had seen the leaked messages. She had been exposed for pushing my parents to cut me out, for spending money before the will was finalized, for lying about her involvement. Now, she was too embarrassed to show her face. After the ruling, my father gave me one last look. Cold, angry, full of hatred. Then he spoke. He told me I was dead to him. Told me to never contact them again, like I hadn't already cut them off months ago. Like he still thought he had control. Then, another bombshell dropped. A tax fraud investigation. Turns out, my father's financial records didn't just expose what he did to me. There were other discrepancies, other shady transactions. Now, the IRS was taking a closer look. The same man who tried to erase me might lose everything because he got greedy. The extended family was still split down the middle. Some cut my parents off completely. They saw the proof, saw the fraud, and wanted nothing to do with them. Others, they made excuses. They were just looking out for the family. It's still wrong to take them to court. You should have handled it privately. Those people, I cut off too. If they were willing to defend this level of manipulation, they weren't worth keeping in my life. Freedom, finally. For the first time in months, I felt free. No more legal battles. No more toxic family drama. No more people trying to control me. I had fought back, and I had won. A month later, I heard through the grapevine that my father was forced to sell property to cover legal fees. The same inheritance money he stole? Gone. The same security he thought he had? Vanished. Everything he did to secure his future had just destroyed it. Then, the final email came in. My mother. A long, desperate message. Begging me to come back to the family. Talking about how she missed me. How she wanted to fix things. How none of this was her fault. I didn't even read the whole thing. I deleted it. Not long after, my brother reached out. This time, it wasn't anger. It was regret. He finally realized what he lost. He wanted to make things right. But after everything he did, there was no going back. I ignored the message. Some things can't be fixed. I took my share of the money and did something for myself. I moved to a new city, a new apartment, a new life. No more family guilt. No more looking over my shoulder. No more living in their shadow. This was my fresh start. I made one final Reddit update. Not for pity. Not for validation. Just to thank the people who supported me. The response? Overwhelming. You did the right thing. Your family lost the best thing they had. You. Living well is the best revenge. Enjoy your life, man. Final reflection looking back. I realized something. My family had spent years controlling me, manipulating me, trying to force me into their mold. And when I refused to play along, they threw me away. But in doing that, they showed me exactly who they really were. And that was the biggest gift they ever gave me. Because now, I was finally free.